Welcome to Literacy Matters. I'm your host, Dr. Cheryl Lundy Swift. Joining us today is Amy Siracusano. Amy worked in public education for about 25 years before becoming a national literacy consultant. Her career has included many positions like classroom teacher, learning specialist, Title I teacher, vice principal, literacy specialist for the Board of Education, and an adjunct professor. She has presented nationally on various learning topics, including assessment, dyslexia, reading, and writing. She's on the board of directors for the Reading League. She also is a training specialist for Acadience and an adjunct professor for the Advanced Reading Science program at Brooklyn College. She is determined to support national efforts in making sure teachers are equipped with deep knowledge of language systems and teaching approaches to ensure all students leave second grade with proficient reading and writing skills. Amy, welcome to the show.
I can't wait to have this chat with you today. It's truly been an opportunity to be surrounded by a village of people that have afforded me with opportunities and experiences to learn and grow beside them through these many years that I've been in education. And I'm completely honored. There are many people who have been part of this journey with me, and I'm beyond grateful for each and every one of them.
So, I've been doing a little bit of a deep dive on some of the work that you're doing. You compare the simple view of reading to what you call the not so simple view of writing. Can you remind us like what the simple view of reading is?
Sure, absolutely. So the simple view of reading was developed in 1986 by two researchers, Goff and Tunmer. And the original model said decoding multiplied by language comprehension yields or equals reading comprehension. And that model has been updated by those researchers not too long ago to rename decoding as word recognition, right? Because decoding today has a little bit of a different meaning. So word recognition multiplied by language comprehension equals reading comprehension. And that's very different from the model in writing that was developed by other researchers. And Virginia Berninger was the lead researcher on that, those two models in writing. And it does not have the multiplication sign like the simple view of reading. It's quite different. I'd be happy to show you the models
So
if
that'd
you
be
want.
great. I think our listeners and viewers would love to take a peek at it.
Great. Let me go ahead and bring up my screen and make this a little larger so you can see it. Can you see that?
Oh, sure.
Perfect. So in 2003, Virginia Berninger developed, with other colleagues, developed a model in writing called the simple view of writing. And as you can see here with this graphic, it does not have the multiplication sign, similarly to the simple view of writing, reading. In 2006, they updated that model again with Virginia Berninger as the lead researcher on that. To update some items, and they renamed it the not so simple view of writing. And I really take this information, this research into schools, working with administrators and classroom teachers to really talk about what this means for instructional practices. But you can see the model itself did not change much, but some of the terminology changed and was enhanced based on research that they did.
So can you walk us through what these kind of points are on this triangle?
Absolutely. So at the center and the core of everything that we do is really working memory, cognitive flow. In order for us to be a skilled writer, we have to know something about the topic that we're writing it, right? We have to have that background knowledge in order to be able to pull from it. I'm pulling from it right now as I'm speaking to you.
Sure.
So that's at the core of everything. In the lower left-hand corner, we have transcription skills. These might be called in the classroom foundational writing skills. Things like automatizing handwriting, so kids can form the letters of the alphabet without thinking about it, without a model, right? Utilizing keyboarding skills at a certain point in time, not early on, not too early on, right? Being very systematic and explicit in that kind of instruction. Spelling, spatial organization, that's all included in transcription. At the top of the triangle is text generation. This includes words, sentences, how we're going to format that. And again, this takes explicit instruction. But this gets a little more complex through time, right? Because we start out with teaching things like very simple sentences, getting into complex sentences, types of sentences, all of that, while building vocabulary, knowledge of figurative language, that sort of thing. And then in the lower right-hand corner is executive functions. And a lot of us don't really think too much about how critical and how impactful executive function is and is occurring as students are trying to write on paper, right? So supervisory attention, meaning the teacher, the educator, the adult in the room is keeping a pulse on what's happening, not just setting kids off on their own and saying, go at it. Goal setting is critical. Something as simple as using finger spaces, doing like a return sweep, when to break a word up at the end of a margin, not breaking numbers up at the end of the paper, going to the next line, things like that, that aren't always included in writing programs. And
Right.
unless the teacher is thinking about this in instruction, it may not happen. And then the last big shift from these two models, the researchers added strategies for self-monitoring and regulating and instruction. What I tell teachers is this is really a checklist that really should be individualized for students to make sure that kids are learning and growing and being responsible for more things in their writing to become more independent. But we want to keep all of this nice and calm and dormant. I always think of this triangle in my mind, metaphorically speaking, as a volcano.
Hmm.
I do not want this to erupt. And what I see in classrooms is kids ripping up their papers, throwing it to the side, saying, I can't, I don't know, I'm not able to, shutting down. And I want to keep this cognitive flow, this working memory, nice and calm as we're working through these exterior items or these concepts, these skills that need to take place to do something well. So, yeah.
I love that. I'm never going to see this triangle the same again. It's going to always be a volcano for me. And I love the fact we do not want it to erupt. Thank you so much for sharing that,
Of course.
for sure. So, you talked about students tearing up paper and not feeling confident. Why do you feel like so many students struggle with writing?
Well, the thing is that we in education teach to things that we feel most comfortable in.
Mm,
And when we don't, as educators, feel comfortable in teaching a skill, a concept, an idea, a strategy, we avoid it. And it's just human nature. It's something I've seen through the last 25 years in my career. And I think most educators would agree with that comment. So, um, writing is very difficult. Most of us in higher ed, did not get training on teaching handwriting or sentence level instruction. I think a lot of professors think and feel since we're college age students, we can write, and so we could just teach it. We can break it down for kids. And it's not really as easy as that. There's a lot of language to know. There's a lot of terminology. There's a lot of instruction behind it. And unfortunately, a lot of programs that are out there in writing sit in the land of identification tasks. And that's not going to get us where we need to go. And there's not enough practice for kids. So it's a challenge. It's been historically a challenge. Yeah.
wow. So, what are some instructional approaches that you think can address those challenges?
First and foremost, schools absolutely need a scope and sequence in writing K-5. That's first and foremost. They need something that's going to guide them as they go through this journey to pay attention to things that don't always show up in standards or in programs like use of margins, spacing, sizing, like I mentioned, breaking words up. Teaching sentence level instruction through the lens of oral language first, and then through the lens of written language and what that looks like and sounds like throughout time. Um, and I think a lot of schools are missing that. The other piece is teachers need training in what this instruction looks like in the classroom.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, school systems have so much in-service training to do. And they're not getting it during their pre-service days. So it's a lot of challenging components. There's usually one person who's in the building who's an excellent, what I would call grammarian, or what we would expect from a high school AP English teacher, right? Who knows a lot about language and teaching language. But for many of us in elementary, we're generalists and we're not specialists in all these areas. And that's a real challenge here in the United States.
I'm going to tell you your response if, my former students would just say facts. Like, all
Yeah.
true facts, and and it's important to know that, like, our teachers maybe aren't trained. Like, we as teachers weren't trained particularly how to teach students to write. So I think, thank you for that reminder, and really saying that out loud, right? Because that, then we can name it, we can then do something about it. So that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you had, you showed us that triangle or volcano,
Yep.
and transcription was on the left-hand side. How do you think writing and transcription skills, how do they connect or benefit children's decoding and
Mm.
reading skills?
Yeah, so Virginia Berninger in her research talks a lot about the integration of orthographic codes, right? So what the letters look like, the forms of the letters, phonological codes, the letter name, letter sound, right? When we say the name of a letter, B, we are producing individual speech sounds, right? B, E. We say it very quickly, phonological codes. And then we have a third system that comes into play, which is the graphomotor, right? Graphomotor codes, which are the written shapes. And what we know from research is the two areas of the brain, right? The phonological processor and the orthographic processor. When we put pen to paper, we are actually activating those two areas and solidifying, cementing those areas as kids are learning to write the letters of the alphabet. But this takes a lot of fine motor development, right? It takes systematic, explicit instruction. And it doesn't just happen during the month of November. And I jokingly say, because it's handwriting month, right? This is daily, systematic, explicit instruction. And a lot of our educators don't have great pencil grip. They don't know strokes for development. But as soon as you put pen to paper, it activates that reading brain and it reinforces the knowledge in that reading brain in terms of sound simple correspondence. It's critical. It's a critical component in early education.
Yeah, and it's so funny, Amy, because people think that handwriting is just penmanship, but it's not, right? And so that's why, we need to get back to those basics, because we want to improve our reading scores. What do we need to do? We do need to include that explicit, systematic handwriting instruction as well. I love that you mentioned this, and I appreciate your connecting it to brain research.
Yeah, and one more thing I want to tell you, not too long ago, this was an aha moment for me. I was in the back of a classroom of a first grade classroom. And the teacher was doing a typical dictation test, right, for spelling. And the student in the back of the room, it's hard to keep an eye on what everybody's doing. We know that in front of the room. The student heard the word and kept saying the name of the letter, like knew how to spell it orally, kept saying the name of the letter, but was looking around the room for how to form that letter. So it wasn't that the child didn't know how to spell the word that was given to them orally. It was that they couldn't form the letter and it was holding that up. So when we think about that triangle, that cognitive load, that cognitive flow, they were losing it because they kept thinking, how do I form the letter? How do I form the letter? I know the name, I know, and they couldn't do it. Teachers on to the next one. And so I bet, I didn't stay to see what happened next, but I bet the student failed the assessment, not because they didn't know the letters in the word or how to spell it, but because of handwriting.
Wow, it's that's a powerful story, and a great reminder that our students sometimes know more than we realize they know, but we've not given them all the tools that they need, right, to
Yeah.
show us what they know. How unfortunate, right? So that's it's a really, really powerful story. When
Yeah.
I think about, for example, even middle school students, but also those our little students as well. We obviously are going to start with, like, words and then move on to sentences and so forth. What do you think the impact of sentence construction is on composition writing?
Yeah. It's huge. We write a lot of times early on the way we speak, right?
Yeah.
We see that. Um, and so oral language is really critical in this work. Um, we have in our standards, a lot of times when we're thinking about teaching writing and reading, we look at the writing and reading standards, the language standards. We in states also have speaking and listening standards. And when we think about developing skilled readers and writers, all of that sits on the shoulders of oral language. So, as educators early on, we need to be able to model and teach kids how to ask and then answer questions in complete sentences, not just the teacher driving the questions,
Yeah.
the students. And this can happen through rich read alouds where students are asking questions about the text and other students answering questions in complete sentences. 9 times out of 10, I did a professional learning yesterday with a large school district. I asked them a question. I said, where are the eggs? And they all said, under the hen. I said, complete sentence, please. I just mentioned this to you. And the whole room cracked up laughing. But the truth is, this is what we do. So
Yeah.
when we expect students to respond in complete sentences, they start to get this language, this sequence of words, right, in their head. And not just sentences that end in a period, sentences that end in a question mark, right? Those are sentences, right? Those are questions. So getting kids to do this early on, even before they can read and write these kinds of things, is going to be critical for when we get into that written language and we're looking at forming these things in print. And all of those things come together. Transcription and composition come together.
I love that. I mean, oral language, I mean, we can't say enough about the importance of oral language. And what I want people to realize, and, Dr. Molly Ness was on the show, and she talked about that read alouds are not just for little kids, that
Yeah.
this oral language development continues to happen, right? So I love that we would add that. What else do you think teachers can do to really move students from kind of sentence writing to really writing like a paragraph? Like that, I remember when you get a child to move from a sentence to actually a paragraph, there's nothing sweeter than that. How do we
Yeah.
do it?
Yeah. So, I mentioned at the beginning of our talk that it's really taken a village to get me here. Like everyone should have their village, right?
Sure.
This was kind of the theme of this professional learning yesterday. And so I'm going to talk about another kind of mentor and somebody who's really led me through this is William Van Cleve, my wonderful friend. He passed away a few years ago, but a friend and a colleague and really a mentor in this work. Molly as well, her work in oral language. But William taught me a lot of things about sentence level instruction that I didn't understand and thinking about building a strong foundation for kids. A lot of times in writing and writing tasks in programs that I see around the United States, we are tasked with telling kids to go right to the paragraph,
Mm,
right? To write to the extended writing task. And yes, we want to get there, but it starts with sentence level development. Once we can get kids to get that basic sentence down, even a decodable sentence like the cat sat on the mat, right? Basic sentence. How do we get them to go from that to understanding how to generate a simple paragraph? And to me, in thinking through this, it really is about categorizing. What drives upper elementary school teachers crazy is when kids start writing about one thing
mm,
and they go off on different topics, right?
right.
Right? They lose track of what it is that they're talking about. And that's part of that executive functioning piece in the not so simple view of writing.
Yep.
So when you think about this, it really is about getting kids to categorize like sentences together in a paragraph. So some things that they can really do to really support this work is one, teachers could take sentences out of a very simple text, put them on sentence strips, mix them up, and see if they can reorder them, right? Thinking about what might come first, second, third in that paragraph. Teachers could give kids close activities and sentence starters to get them started to think about what a topic sentence might look like, sound like a detailed sentence, a closing sentence, or a concluding sentence, right? Again, scaffolding it for kids, but not scaffolding it so much that we hold on to the scaffold forever and then kids can't do it without the scaffold, right? Or they think in their minds they can't do this without the scaffold, right? Scaffolds are meant to be temporary.
That's right.
So giving the kids those from going back to reading, sound to symbol, right? Sound to symbol to word, to phrases, to sentences, to decoding, passages.
Right.
Same kind of thing, oral language to sentence level, to grouping like sentences together in terms of a topic, and not setting kids off on their own to do this by themselves,
Yeah.
guiding them, keeping a pulse on what's happening in the classroom, and not just modeling a whole writing task and saying, okay, you saw me do it, so now you go do it. because that's not going to work well either for anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
I love the way you broke that down, and thank you so much for those practical strategies that people can use right away. I can imagine though that a listener might say, "Wow, I really love all of this, Amy, but I don't have any time. Where
Yeah.
am I going to get the time from to teach this?" So, because these classrooms are busy and time is limited, how can teachers just use 10 minutes a day for foundational writing?
Yeah, I talk about this a lot. It's something that actually I did in the school system that I worked in for over 20 years. We changed our language instruction to be only 10 minutes a day, every day. We set the timer. And that was just a small part of our writing block, right? We did paragraph writing as well, but when we were teaching language standards, grammar standards, that kind of thing, we did it for 10 minutes a day. So think about, we always say we don't have enough time, and most language lessons are 30 to 40 minutes.
Right.
So what happens is teachers wait until they can find that 30 or 40-minute section in their time in their day, and it never happens.
Mm.
So think about finding 5 to 10 minutes a day, setting the timer, and choosing a skill, a concept, a standard, and teaching it over several days. Because a lot of this vocabulary in language instruction, just think about interrogative. They're not terms and words that kids are using on the playground or talking about over lunch. The only time they're getting this language is from you in the classroom. So
That's
if we break our lesson up, today is an I do, use a gradual release, set my timer. Tomorrow is a we do, we do, we do, we do, we do, until
right.
we get to you do, till that gradual release where kids can do it independently. You'll find it easier to find a short amount of time every single day and be consistent with it rather than waiting for that 40-minute period when you can get it all done in once. And it'll benefit students because they're hearing language every single day, the same language.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
that's super powerful with just 5 to 10 minutes a day. I love it.
yeah, yeah.
So, when I think about this and think about scheduling and things like, planning the schedules and looking at curriculum, school leaders have a lot to do to try and support their teachers. What do you recommend that school leaders like should know when they're looking at a literacy curriculum or when they're trying to develop a schedule to strengthen writing instruction?
Yeah, we have to really pay attention to our data. Dr. Stephanie Stoller talks about this quite a lot,
Yeah.
right? It's not a one size fits all. We have to stop thinking about a conveyor belt and just keep sending kids down the belts. We really have to look at our data and look and see what classes need more time within the block that we have for literacy. If we have students that are really behind in decoding and in word recognition and spelling and sorts of things, we might need to lean more time to give kids double doses in those foundational skills
Yeah.
and a little less time in those higher skills, like being independent readers. To kind of close those gaps, because what I'm seeing in schools is we are actually creating gaps by giving kids what they don't need. We are create and we're holding kids back. So we really have to think about what is our block of time and then looking at our data to say how much time do we need to dedicate to X, Y, and Z, knowing that these are the things that we need to teach. And if we have a scope and sequence that everybody is knowledgeable of, we can really play into that scope and sequence and make goals to close those gaps, not year-long goals. I'm talking 6 to 8 week goals,
Yeah.
and making sure we're hitting our target, kind of like that progress monitoring piece, so that we can make shifts in the schedule and we're not wedded to something that's set in stone. And I feel like sometimes our schedules are set in stone and they're very inflexible and they need to change.
Wow, that's that hit me like a ton of bricks. That's so important. So really follow the data, like let the data drive you.
Yes.
Well, what do you think about when it comes to like actually choosing a curriculum to support students in strengthening their writing instruction? What should they look for?
I would ensure that the program provides a scope and sequence that includes probably more than what is in most state standards, includes those things like use of margins and because I just don't see it. How to use paper, how to indent. It just is
Right.
it's not there.
Yeah.
Um, a program that's going to do a lot in practice, giving kids and teachers more practice activities than needed, so that if they need it, places where kids can be challenged, ideas for scaffolding and supports, and making sure that there is kind of something to think about are English learners around the United States, really using videos and images to get that language into play. And also not forgetting, we teach vocabulary and comprehension, but let's face it, in language and in grammar, we have a lot of vocabulary. So taking some of those strategies, those good strategies we know in teaching vocabulary and bringing it over into our language instruction. All these things really need to be married and wedded along the way, so that good instruction is just good instruction.
Wow, such awesome advice. And I'd love for you to please share one like empowering nugget. I mean, you've shared so many things, but if you could nail it down to one thing that you would leave for our listeners who might be teachers or school leaders or a family member, what would that empowering nugget be?
Okay. So for family members, one of the most beneficial things you can do for your students is really help them with fine motor skills. We're not seeing kids come in with the motor skills in their hands necessary to hold a writing utensil.
Mm.
It's very heavy on little hands. So anything you could do with Play-Doh and Legos and stroke development, top down, left, right, all of that sort of thing
Sure.
would be really beneficial. Giving kids tools to write on paper and getting them away from digital devices. For teachers, slow and steady wins the race. I want them to give kids enough time and practice to automatize skills
Mm.
so that we are not rushing through a program thinking we have to do day by day, that we're not creating gaps, that we're meeting kids where they need and giving them what they need, giving them the time and intensity in going through the ground and building a strong foundation. And it starts with handwriting and oral language right at the very bottom. And if you have kids coming in that are EL that have never learned a printed language, you are going to start with handwriting as well. And I just want to put a plug in. Cursive is just as important as manuscript. There's lots of research coming out about cursive writing.
Yes, there
So
is.
please, everybody, don't discount cursive. It's tied to spelling acquisition. It's tied to working memory, fine motor skills. It's critical, and it avoids those reversals. So that's my nuggets I'll leave you with. Long ones.
Oh my God, they're fantastic ones, though. Thank you so much, Amy. Was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for having me on today. Really
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Of course.